Thanks for tuning in to CCnDoc Talk. We'd love for you to follow us on social media at CCnDoc. That's CCnDoc. And you can visit our website at CCnDoc.com. We also take monthly donations to support this broadcast if you're so inclined. We'd love to hear your comments, suggestions, and questions, and we'll do our best to respond. Thanks, and have a fantabulous day.
Hello and welcome to CCnDoc Talk. We are going to discuss love and approval. Which is more important, love or approval? And I'm also going to throw in the word acceptance, right? Now think about it. What's more important to you, being loved by somebody or having their approval? Now the ultimate goal is to have both, right?
That was my response. I'm like, well, duh,
I want both, right? And yet there are situations where you know somebody loves you or that you love them, but you really just don't approve of their choices or their behaviors, or you don't. And by the way, I'm not sure if approval or acceptance, I'm going to kind of use them a little bit interchangeably for a moment here until I kind of decipher this, because again, this is just top of mind random thoughts that we bring up on our podcast. But I can love somebody, but do I really accept their choices? Do I really approve of what they're doing, or whether it's how they spend their money or who they're living with or their choice of boyfriend or girlfriend or
spouse
or their, the spouse? Come on, you make it really personal there. And it goes back to, there was a time in my life that, I was told that by one of my close loved ones that they really didn't approve of our lifestyle. And I remember, well, I'm not telling you for your approval. I'm telling you so you know what's going on in my life. And
it's funny because even the idea that it's a lifestyle, as if we had a choice.
Right. Well, everything in life is a choice. Just some things there's cognitive dissonance where you go against the grain of yourself forever, which causes dis-ease, which is disease, So if you're living true to yourself, then yeah, you shouldn't have to go against your lifestyle or, those types of things.
if you're living true to yourself, it's not a lifestyle choice. It is
an innate desire.
Yes, it's who you are.
Yeah. All right. So,
anyway. And then that brings up the question, can you accept somebody without approving of their choices? So interesting.
So you're accepting somebody, but you don't approve it. So I can accept it, but I don't approve of it.
Can you, I guess is the question. Can you?
Yeah.
And do we really even have a right to,
we're going to go back to, the unconditional love thing, right? And so, can you love somebody unconditionally? Can you love somebody to the point that no matter what they're doing in their world, their choices, their behaviors, all of that, you just love them?
But see, I'm looking at this from the opposite perspective, being someone who has historically needed people's acceptance / approval. I'm looking at this from a me perspective, not our last conversation we talked about unconditional love for others. And this time I feel like
this is about the self.
This is about us.
Okay, so let's break down the self.
Do we need love or acceptance or approval or both or all three? Or
take a look at social media.
Yeah, because
I put
really
something out there, and how often do you go back to say, did they look at it? Did I get a like? Did I get a response? You go out and put something out on, whether it's a text message, you look for a response. If it's out on social media, whether it's Instagram or Facebook, you go out to see what the comments are. How many likes do we have, or whatever it is? We're constantly looking for that validation, closing the loop. And what is that? Is it because these people love us? Is it? Or is it because we need
to be accepted and approved of?
Right.
Well, because, and case in point, the first time that there's a negative comment,
a troll,
you could have 100 good comments and you have one negative troll, and that's the comment you focus on, right?
What the fuck is that? Are you kidding me? And all you do is delete it, right? Because you don't want that out there. Because they don't approve of us, or they don't approve of what we put out there.
How dare they?
How dare they? And then it's them, right? Because, they're the ones that are misguided and ill-intentioned.
Well, duh.
Right. I've learned that some people are really smart. It's just in all the wrong ways.
Yeah. Okay, so
All right.
so back to this whole, do we need? So is it dependent upon
So it's
the?
conditional.
Yeah. I was going to say, is it conditional? But then I didn't want to confuse the topic. Is it dependent upon, like, do certain people matter more than others in your life? Like, does it matter more to us that we're loved and accepted by family members than friends? Or, in other words, is there a spectrum of, who is it more important to get one or the other or both from?
Well, I think there's a thing about we die to please those who love us least.
Right.
Right. And that's a tough one. I mean, these people that just have to love their parents. There's the movie The House, and he was raised by abusive parents. And the grandson says to the dad, well, why did you stay there when you were old enough to leave? And he said, well, because they were my parents, and I loved them, even though they were very abusive. Right. And so,
and it's hard to understand that way of thinking sometimes.
It really is. And, we die to please those who love us least. And look at that in the work environment. If you're not getting approval or acceptance from a boss or a coworker, how much do we go out of our way to seek their approval? And we behave differently when we're trying to seek somebody's approval.
Well, and how much more stress and angst and disconnect in your own body does that create when you're living in that space of trying to make someone else accept or approve of you.
Right. And I had that with one of my senior leaders. I mean, I wanted this senior leader to accept who I was. And she was a tough cookie. And I actually have a male and a female figure that were senior leaders, and I wanted their approval. I wanted them to accept me. Even, I thought differently. I did homework recently. I prepared differently for things. And it was, such a disconnect, but I still wanted them to accept me and see my differences as value added to the organization. And so I didn't change who I was. I just pushed harder.
You just upped your game. And,
I upped my game,
went over
right?
Well, but
you try that much harder to get that, right?
And it's so funny, right? Because you knew that you had that from everybody else, and so on one hand, you're like, well, everybody else.
Why do I need that?
Everybody else gives me that. Everybody else sees me that way. Everybody else loves me. Why can't you love me?
And you try so
and you
much harder.
and so all of these other people, but because they were the two senior leaders, then you have to try harder for them. Well, and I could say the same thing about, certain situations too, like historically speaking, in a particular situation, which I'm not going to get into detail about because it's a little more personal, and we do have lots of people listening to this podcast. But there's,
everybody's wondering if it's
I
them.
Could say,
thanks for saying that. No,
what?
I said now everybody's wondering, is it them, the one that's listening? No,
it's not you. I'll tell you that. Anyway, my point is, I can say, historically speaking, everybody, loved me, but then there's this one person who should have loved me and didn't. And so then, I spent all this time, years even, trying to get this one person to, give me this little ounce of love, to the point where I truly don't give a shit anymore. I've given up on that. And because I've realized it's, it takes a while to get to that point, but you realize it's not you.
Right.
It's them.
Right.
It really, there is not one thing that I could do or could have done differently to impact how that person treats me, how much that person loves me, or how much that person accepts me, which is not very much. Because it wasn't me.
Well, and some of these people that you're talking about, and by the way, your old boss that you left Wells Fargo because of, rings a lot of what you just said. No matter what you did, she did not like or accept who you were. She was not going to be.
That wasn't who I was initially talking about. So thanks for bringing up another one.
I know, but what I'm saying is that, there are people throughout our lives that no matter what we do, you go so far out of your way, and you're never going to get their true acceptance and approval in a way that you need it.
And so really what we're talking about is the idea of recognizing, when it's no longer your job to try to make someone, it's never your job to make someone love you, for starters.
Right.
But I think, when do you come to that realization that it's just not going to happen? And the reason it's not going to happen is not because of you. So, we've got to stop taking it personally, right? And we have to stop thinking that we somehow have the power
to change
somebody
or to change the relationship.
Exactly.
You really don't have the power to change the relationship. You own what you're 100% accountable for 50%. And if you've given 50% of the relationship, and if you've given it your 50% and they haven't given their 50% in a way that works for your needs and your love and your internal psyche, then
it's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
Right. You can't give your 50% and their 50% because
it doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
Well, you've given way too much of yourself and you lose yourself. That's when we lose who we are.
Exactly.
And it's interesting because, if you were to look at, again, this is about love and acceptance or love and approval. You can still love people. They're these people because they're humans and, they're humans and they're made of love and they're to give love or whatever.
Everybody deserves to be loved.
Everybody deserves to be loved. But it doesn't mean that you have to like who they are or how they're treating you. And so therefore, what do you have to do is you have to then like who you are and how you're treating yourself and how you're thinking about yourself and not taking things personally and not making assumptions and doing your best, being impeccable with your words, all of the 4 agreements just summed right up there. So you have to mind your 50%.
This is actually a great conclusion to our last podcast. So if you didn't listen to our last podcast, listen to our last podcast about unconditional love, because what you just said is actually the conclusion
that we should have put in that one
to get to there. And the discussion we just couldn't get to it. So that's a great conclusion to our last podcast and a great start for this one because they really are kind of tied together.
Yeah,
I mean,
they are. I know really there's similarities. I wanted to do this podcast a month ago and we just didn't find the time to sit down and record it.
Well, I can't imagine why. We were in the middle of a 10-week holiday tour.
Yeah.
So interesting. So this is so interesting because really, I think the aha, for me at least, and going back to that situation that I was talking about was a few years ago when I was like, I'm just done. Yeah. Like I'm done trying to make an extra effort. Because every time we put ourselves in that situation, I would come back from that completely depleted of energy. I never let it affect my self-esteem because that's not who I am and because I have very strong self-esteem. But you could see how people who don't have, healthy self-esteem could just be completely eroded over time and destroyed by people who actively are not loving and actively are not accepting. But I think for me, I finally just had to come to a place where I was like, I'm just done. Like I'm just going to have better boundaries and I'm just not going to spend time with that person because not only do I get nothing from it, but it completely erodes my own sense of well-being and sometimes even self. So, I think it's okay sometimes to set that boundary, but I think it comes back to, are you the kind of person who needs acceptance? Like you tend to not be needy of people's acceptance. And now I do think you need validation. Ways.
Sometimes I need that.
I do think you need validation sometimes.
Which is interesting.
Of certain things, like certain skills that you perform or certain...
certainly, all the work that I do on things and the projects, I'm like I'm like show and tell, right? And the kindergartner's like, hey, come look what I did, right? And you better like it because, it was put on with mortar and grout and it's not coming off easily. So, and just tell me how much you love it. Yeah. Well, I do need the validation. Absolutely.
And it's interesting that you said it that way because I just had a thought when you said that, like, some people would see that as, when you do the show and tell thing, some people could actually see that as like bragging. Well, you don't do it to brag. You do it because you need the validation that
otherwise I'm not going to spend the time doing another one. If you don't like my work, I'm not doing this again for you,
Except you would because you're kind of a glutton for punishment. But okay, so interesting.
Because I need validation, so I'm going to do another one to get that.
All right, so then maybe validation and acceptance are synonyms. And I will say it's probably just been within the last, believe it or not, probably on this family tour more so than anything, that I have seen more of your need for validation and acceptance than I have in the past. And so I don't know if that's just kind of an evolution of your own deconstruction and personal growth and how that's now coming forward, or maybe situationally,
think
you were
about
in a
it.
situation where I was able to see it more because
I retired a year and a half ago, and a lot of validation came from my work environment. So if I didn't have it for a year and a half of being retired, then all of a sudden we get together with people,
right?
And all of a sudden, maybe my need for validation surfaced or resurfaced, or in a way that I was not conscious of. See, this stuff is really scary to talk about.
I think
let's just end this podcast right now.
No, because I think that's really astute on your part. And I think you did a really good job of fooling me and other people that you weren't in that I need validation and acceptance bucket for years. So like even me as your partner, like every once in a while I might see it, but like, I'm the girl who walks away from an interaction going, wanting somebody to like me, wanting somebody, not to the point where I'm like a little puppy dog at all, but I do think about like, what did I do in that interaction that made it a good interaction? Like I'm always like, what was my part in that? What did they think about that? Like I'm always, and I'm thinking about that often before the interaction.
I was going to say, if
I anticipate.
Full disclosure, you're all about making sure that they see you in good light before the interaction. So, making cookies before we go so we could bring them, and it's all a good,
Well, and it's, and while that, it almost sounds selfish when you put it that way, it's also very much a giving thing. Like I really do want
how people perceive you is very important to you, and I didn't realize how much validation was really important to me. And so
okay, I think that's a good, and again, I do want to go back to like, I think it's important for me to make other people feel good,
yes,
about themselves, because I think there's so many people who are just starving for that.
People are starving for affection, starving for kudos, starving for it. And when they don't get it, they don't give it out either.
Right. And so then you go, oh shit, was it me?
Yeah.
Right.
Which then feeds our need for their acceptance and approval and validation even more. I mean, it just deepens it. So we try even harder.
And that's incredibly detrimental to your own sense of self and self-love, because you could question yourself to death on, what could I have done differently? And while what could I have done differently?
Or now what
healthy,
can I do? Or do I need to follow up? Do I need to make a phone call? Do I need to send
then
text?
it becomes unhealthy.
Then it becomes unhealthy.
Right.
So if I were to go back to, there's three things that money can't buy: self-esteem, self-worth, and self-confidence. And if I were to sum up the three are all different, but if I were to sum them up and where do they come from, is trusting oneself.
Yes.
Self-confidence is trusting that if you get into a situation that you have the means to solve any problem that is thrown at you, which give you self-confidence. And the only way to get self-confidence is to have problems that you have solved in the past, which then you have to trust yourself that you can make these, solutions in the future. So anyways, we're not going that way. But anyways, it comes from trusting yourself. As
usual, I'm gonna throw a little curveball into that, which is that I am somebody who has a tremendous amount of trust in myself and my abilities. I truly believe I can do anything. And I have a tremendous amount of self-assurance until you question me.
Are you sure?
And then like I am completely self-confident until somebody questions me or offers me feedback. And then I'm like, oh shit. And then I spiral into this questioning mode of, because then when you question me,
it's so interesting because you ask so many questions.
Right. So when you question me, I question myself. So then I start questioning myself. Well, yeah, I ask so many questions, right? So I'm fine.
So you're okay as long as the questions are externally focused, but as soon as it becomes an internally focused questioning,
then it makes me question myself. Then the number of
questions that you are really good at becomes internal.
Right, it's all internal, and then it's a mess.
Deteriorates your
right, and then it turns into this swirling, and that's why there are so many times, and you'll recognize this. Like there are certain things that I like to do completely independently. And I don't even like to share about it.
You don't do the show and tell.
Sometimes I don't share until after it's published or after it's whatever, because I just don't want to know. Because like it really is. It's actually it's in some ways it's a bit of a character flaw because I don't do well at accepting feedback. But it's more because of what it does to me internally. It's that me. Then I go through this whole litany of questions.
Do you beat yourself up then? Or is it the litany of questions?
It's the questions of, should I have done it this way? Should I have done it this way? Could I have done it differently? Could it have been better? Whereas know that like I've already, like, let's just say it's a blog post, for instance. I've already rewritten and edited that fucker 20 times, right?
Yeah.
So if I give it to you, for instance, before I publish it, and then you
see one
red line,
I was gonna say any red mark on it,
then I'm like,
it's just
and then I have to go all the way back to it.
I'm to the point now that, I mean, when I read your stuff, I'm like, it's fine. And you're like, no. And then you question that. It's like, is it really fine?
Now, are you just saying that because you know?
Are you just saying that because you don't want to? And so I don't know what to do, right? And so,
well, that's why now I publish the blog post, and you.
So if I do find something and I go, all right, there is a typo in there, you're like, I don't want to know. I'm like, okay, then. So I just read it.
Or if it's a typo, it's not a big deal. But like if something really does, or something, if it's a typo or something really doesn't make sense. Because again, I've rewritten it 20 times. So it is possible that, you don't
want my validation. You want my validation that everything's fine.
Yeah.
But then you question that. Anyway, this is not about,
So anyway, right. So that, but it goes back to that whole thing.
But I still love.
It's that.
Everything you do.
Thank you.
Right? Love and approval and acceptance and validation.
Doesn't that go back to, okay, so.
Just love it for what it is.
So that's why I said I was going to throw you a curveball here. So it's not just about external love and acceptance. It's also about internal love and acceptance. Like, when is good enough good enough? And if it's good, right. And when is it good enough for you, right? Even if it's not good enough for somebody else, when is it good enough for you? And how strong are you at being able to say, nope, it's good enough for me, too bad.
So if I put something on social media and I only get one review, one response, one comment, or one like, I just go, I'd still love this post and it was good enough for me.
Exactly.
Right. Or I do something at your mom's house in terms of the remodel. And if I didn't get validation on that, all I had to do is know that I did a good job. I did get a ton of validation.
You did get a ton of validation.
So I'm not going to say that.
Yeah.
But if I didn't.
An awesome thank you card.
Yes, she did. But if there was an area that I was like, okay, that took a lot more work than anybody would have realized, and I need to point that out. Well, I didn't need to point that out because I know internally that I did a great job on that one corner, that one cut, or whatever it was that I did that I'm really proud of. And I just get to, I do my own level of self-validation, acceptance.
Some of that stuff was really hard. So I will validate that. And I think Mom did a great job of validating too. But to your point, yes, I mean, we need to get good at saying, you know what, I feel good about this, and what everybody else thinks doesn't freaking matter.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, your DIY posts on our social media get way more play than pretty much every other thing we put out there. So
I want you to know I was right by Home Depot and Lowe's, and I did not stop in or to buy anything because I have no projects teed up right now. But spring is coming. All right. We actually could have ended this podcast about 10 minutes ago, but then it got really good. So
yeah, I agree.
We're going to go ahead and wrap up. I would like to propose that we do a little turn the topic here to smart money in some of our next posts.
Wow, that's a divergence.
It is. We're going to turn over to smart money. And we're going to do a little bit around courageous money, your adventure through Money National Park. So we're going to do a little journey through Money National Park in a few of our upcoming podcasts.
If you'd like to study in advance, you may buy the book, Courageous Money, Your Adventure Through Money National Park. You can get it on Amazon. You can pretty much get it at any of your favorite booksellers, or you can visit our website at moneynationalpark.com. But the book is available for sale, and we made the ebook very affordable for everybody. So
under $10.
Yeah, it's under $10. So if you'd like to do a little homework on that, and at any point, if you have questions, you can message us on any of our social media platforms.
And we will give you validation for
Facebook and Instagram are the ones that we pay attention to the most. And I say that because there really isn't a good way to message us through the podcast platform. So
absolutely. Thank you.
Thank
Have
you.
a beautiful day.
Looking forward to it.
I love you. I love myself more.
Thanks for tuning in to CCnDoc Talk. We'd love for you to follow us on social media at CCnDoc. That's CCnDoc. And you can visit our website at CCnDoc.com. We also take monthly donations to support this broadcast if you're so inclined. We'd love to hear your comments, suggestions, and questions, and we'll do our best to respond. Thanks, and have a fantabulous day.